Well, welcome everybody to our entry-level driver training webinar. A little background on this, and one of the reasons we're grateful to have Sarah Huffman participate here is she was the one that actually alerted us that we might have a problem. You know, as much as local government risk management services focuses on and does, and you know, helps with any sort of defensive driving program, we typically don't focus on commercial drivers other than, you know, some administrative things. So beginning of this year, the end of last year, we were a little bit caught by surprise when we started getting the notifications from the Federal Motor Carrier Act on the February 7th deadline for starting the entry-level driver training program. So we apologize that we were kind of caught a little bit unawares. I suspect during COVID, the federal government had lots of time to think about other unfunded mandates that they could hand down to the various states and local governments, and this in some ways is one. However, there are some good reasons why they have done this, and over time, if you look back the last couple of years, they have slowly added some additional things to make the road safer for the traveling public as well as those who drive commercial vehicles out there. And just recently, I want to remind everybody, I happen to be up very close to where this terrible tractor trailer accident happened off of I-75 near Cartersville a week or so ago. But if you look at the photo here and you think about the last year around the state, unfortunately, this is not an anomaly. This happens quite a bit and often with the same tragic circumstances. And it's things like this that really cause the federal government as well as various states to really look hard at the different regulations affecting commercial drivers and their operations of vehicles on the road. And again, for our local governments, you know, many of these same things apply. You know, it doesn't have to be an over-the-road tractor trailer or something like that, but we do transport people with our transit systems. We have school buses, we have large vehicles that we operate ourselves. So many of the same things kind of apply. But again, 3 people died in this crash. In a series of unfortunate circumstances in some ways. Tractor trailer left the roadway, hit a guardrail and a concrete pillar supporting an overhead sign. This truck burst into flames. Sign fell into the southbound lane and then was struck by another tractor trailer, causing it to run off the road. And this is not unusual. We have people going the wrong way on the interstates all the time, passenger vehicles, trucks. In many cases, it's the congestion, it's the speed of travel and the following too closely that cause many of these things. So there is a need for some additional training, and that's really what the entry-level driver training is. Really kind of a really super defensive driving course for new commercial drivers. And I just want to give a little bit of a background on some of the requirements and some of the things we have to do. And then Sarah is going to talk specifically on her experiences and actually running this program. And Sarah does carry a commercial driver's license herself, so she's well able to talk about this. If you think about when the requirement happened, again, February 7th, 2022, everybody who has a commercial driver's license or who have commercial drivers had to begin using this entry-level driver training program for all new drivers. There's some exceptions we'll talk about, but the goal was to ensure only qualified drivers receive their commercial driver's license or an upgrade. You know, in the past, the commercial driver's license test and behind the wheel, you know, it's pretty comprehensive. It covers a lot of things, but one of the things it really didn't cover necessarily in all places was some of the basic safety and operating those large vehicles, operating around the public, and some other things. And that's exactly what this program was designed to do. And it really sets a national baseline for everybody around the country, which is not a bad thing. In many cases, many of the providers who already did the training for commercial drivers already incorporated many of the things that they're doing now So it really wasn't much of a change, but particularly for us in the state of Georgia, for our local governments, it certainly is a big change, and it did cause, many of you I know to and continue to have some concerns about how we're going to do this. So a couple of things just to think about. Some pros and cons here. If your driver held a commercial learner's permit prior to February 7th, 2022, they're not required to complete the ELDT program, as long as the commercial learner's permit has not expired. So if they started the process before the date of February 7th, they're good to go. They can go ahead and do their testing as they normally would. If they were issued a commercial driver's license or any of the endorsements, an S&P or an H, before February 7th, they're not required to complete the ELDT program. Or if they had a previously issued license endorsement, even if it had lapsed, they're not required to do this program. So only, excuse me, things. But if a driver held a commercial driver's license prior to the compliance date, and now they want to do an upgrade to a higher class of CDL, or they want to add an endorsement, passenger hazardous material or school, that's what the SP and H stand for, they must complete the ELDT for the class of CDL to which they're upgrading. So it really depends. So if a driver obtains a commercial learner's permit on or after February 7th, they must complete the required entry-level driver training program. So, that kind of tells you who has to and who has not. And I know one of the issues, Sarah was aware of this. I know she wanted to make sure that she completed everything she needed to do before these requirements went into effect. And then she could be prepared to actually help train her folks afterwards. So, here's how this worked. For the Federal Motor Carrier Act entry-level driver requirements, to take your CDL skills or knowledge test, you have to complete the entry-level driver training program with a registered provider. And who's a registered provider? Well, one of the handouts we're going to give you a series of fact sheets on the entry-level driver program. We're going to give you a handout on trainer requirements, and then actually the PDF version of the FMCA information on the entry-level driver program. One of those things will be a list of who is a registered provider. And if you think about your local community, in many cases, it's your local technical college, it's a trucking company, transit company in many cases, or others who are doing this. And there are also many providers who also do this on their own. They went and registered as a provider. They already have their CDL or their endorsements, and they're one of the people, and they're one of the groups of people who may do some traveling training for different people who need this. So to take the CDL skills knowledge test, you've got to work with an authorized registered provider and do the training, because only they can actually submit the information online to the Federal Motor Carrier Registry and provide certification that your drivers or you have completed this test, completed the training. You have to complete the entry-level driver training before taking the CDL skills test or before applying for any of the endorsements that you have to have. So again, it's critical to find a registered provider who can provide this training and get it done before your folks go out and actually take the skills or the behind the wheel test. So again, the bottom line is, if a commercial driver or a wannabe commercial driver gets their learner's permit on or after February 7th of this year, or if they need to upgrade the current commercial driver's license to hazardous passenger or school bus level, then they must complete the required entry-level driver training. So before I turn it over to Sarah, again, I want to compliment Sarah because she brought this to our attention, and we did a little research. And one of the things that we did for our benefit, and also to see if it would help her, because her concern was, we have this requirement, she's a registered provider with her local government, but how was she going to find the time to create this, in many cases, very large commercial driver safety training that they needed to do? It would be, you know, the federal government doesn't tell us, you know, they don't tell us exactly how to do this. They tell us what we have to do. So that means a provider would need to create the training that would meet the requirements to do this. So we did some research, and one of the things we did find, and I think Sarah will talk about this a little bit, was J.J. Keller, who provides a lot of content for different types of safety training in all kinds of subjects, had also done some significant work on providing both instructor and student manuals and contact for the entry-level driver training program. So we worked out with Sarah to get her a copy of that, to have her take a look at, see if it met her needs and if it was doable. And I'm going to let her talk about what the end result was there. But J.J. Keller, I think, did provide a significant solution that really helped us not have to create the stuff from scratch. And I will tell you, I know of other providers. I know several technical colleges and a couple of trucking agencies that I talked to are also using the J.J. Keller program, not particularly endorsing J.J. Keller, but it just seemed to work. So that's kind of the background on why we're doing this, why we have to do this. And then I'm going to let Sarah take the lead here and talk about specifically what her experience is and her thoughts on this whole process. So Sarah, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dennis. Are you gonna make me the presenter? Maybe.
Dan, you may need to make Sarah the presenter. There you go. Sarah, you should be the presenter now.
Yep. All right, so as Dennis mentioned, I am the risk manager for the City of Rome. I've been here for a little over 5 years. I've been in risk for 4 years. I did obtain my CDL and passenger endorsement in preparation for this training. I was blessed to be able to train with our transit department to get that license and the endorsement all in one. And we are using the material from J.J. Keller, as Dennis mentioned. One of the things that are questions that's come up is, how long does this training take? So I've given the training a couple times now, and I would say for the class A or B training, if you do an 8-hour day's worth of training, it takes about 1.5 to 2 days to get through all of the material that you need to get through. So the way that the training requirements are laid out is that the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration so kindly listed 30 topics that you have to cover, but as Dennis mentioned, they didn't actually give you the training material. So J.J. Keller has each topic broken down into a separate chapter in their book, which I know y'all can't really see me, but training manual, it's 500 and something pages. So it's a beast. The class A and class B classes are exactly the same except for one chapter, which is the coupling and uncoupling that's covered in the class A CDL class, obviously not necessary for the class B. And then the passenger endorsement has a whole separate book with 20 something more chapters, and it takes about another half day to a full day to get through that, depending on how big your class is, how many questions there are. And one of the big requirements for the documentation of this training is that you have to give written assessments. And part of the J.J. Keller material, they actually give you quizzes, and I'll show y'all an example of that in a couple slides. But each person has to pass with at least 80% on the written assessments. And the way they do it is they break it up so that there's a written assessment on each topic. So at the end of each chapter, there's a 10-question quiz. Some of them are only 5 questions. So J.J. Keller does include some additional topics that's not required by federal motor carrier that you can choose to utilize or not. Human trafficking, compliance, safety, and accountability, special regs, crossing the Canadian border, and basic business practices. I haven't used those, but they're in the book if you like them. And now I'm going to just show y'all a couple examples of what the training looks like, because that's what Dennis wanted me to show. So they give you PowerPoints. This is from chapter 6, which is about backing. And so they give you all of the talking points in the PowerPoint. So you're literally handed the training and you just basically read what's on here to give it. So that is one benefit of using this training. So I didn't have to design anything myself, because that would have taken a ridiculously long time with all the topics that you have to cover. But they give you PowerPoints, videos, talking points, everything you need. Just another example where you can see that they're giving you, this is what the quizzes look like. So like I said, this is from chapter 6, backing and docking. It's a little 10-question quiz. In the instructor manual, you have all the answer keys, so you can grade them. I like to give the quizzes as I go through the class. So we do the first topic, quiz, second topic, quiz. I hand them all the quizzes at the beginning of the class, and we just go through them as they go through the topics. So then it makes it a little bit easier at the end of the class. You're not sitting there waiting on them to fill out 30 quizzes all at once. This is one of the examples from the passenger endorsement. So that kind of goes into dealing with disruptive passengers, cargo management, loading and unloading passengers, ADA compliance. There's several topics that you are required to cover for that endorsement in particular. That's what one of the quizzes looks like. That's one where it's only 5 questions, so super easy. As far as training documentation, like I mentioned, everybody is required to pass a minimum of 80% of the written exams for the behind the wheel, which is what that BTW stands for, range and public road instruction. The instructor must document the total number of clock hours each trainee takes to complete the range and public road curriculums. And this is actual time that the trainee is in control of the vehicle. It does not count time that they are observing somebody else operate the vehicle. And you have to document range and public road separately. And as a note, the trainer doesn't have to be the same trainer. So like at the City of Rome, I'm the theory trainer, so I train all the book stuff and give the quizzes and deal with that. But we actually have designated trainers in our various departments that utilize CDL drivers that are the range and the road instructors. So you can have multiple instructors listed for the one training provider. Just want to put that out there. So this is a little tracking form, super simple, but I made it for my departments just to let them keep up with range and road training time, because when you go to document this information in the training provider registry, which is what the driver services offices check when somebody is going to take their skills test, you actually have to input the score on the written exams, and you have to input the exact hours that they spent on the range and in road training. So I would recommend using a tracking form to document that and keep it with the rest of the training documentation. Otherwise, when you fill that out, you're not going to have the correct documentation that you need to submit in the training provider registry. So once a driver trainee successfully completes the training, the trainer must submit the information to the TPR by midnight of the second business day after the training is completed. There's no penalty if you don't do it by midnight on the second business day, but they highly encourage you to follow this rule because this is the only way that the driver services offices can verify that the training has been completed. And if they pull somebody up and they can't verify the training's been completed, then they will not allow them to take their skills test or the knowledge test if it's for the hazardous materials endorsement. So, and I've actually already run into one issue with that. Luckily, I am on a first name and texting basis with the supervisor at the driver services office here in Rome. And we had an employee go out and she's like, hey, we can find her Class B CDL training, but we can't find her passenger endorsement training in the registry. Did she do it? And I was like, yeah, she did it. I submitted them both at the same time. She's like, we can't find it. And so I was sending her screenshots showing her where it was uploaded on my end. And I was actually not even at work that day, but answered her call and was like, yeah, it's there. So they finally worked it out and my employee was allowed to take her exam, but if they can't find it, they're not going to let them test. So drivers cannot submit information on their own. Only training providers who have registered can submit the certification documentation. And this is the only thing that the states use to verify. As far as document retention, there's always retention requirements with the federal government. So you can see the list of records that should be retained, which is the self-certification by all driver trainees for behind the wheel training and testing that they will comply with DOT regulations for controlled substance testing, age, medical certification, licensing, and driving records, a copy of the license and the permit, all of your instructor qualification documentation, lesson plans, and records of each individual driver training assessment. So I kind of already talked about that. So those 30 quizzes that you have to give to each person, you've got to keep that for 3 years from the date that they were created. And that is the end of my presentation, but I think Dan was going to open it up for questions if anybody has any questions about the process or anything else.
So we have a few questions. Here's the first question. We have employees who just obtained their CDLs this year after 2/7/2022. Would that training have to be included in their testing?
Repeat that again.
So we have an employee that they just hired and again had training or was qualified after 2/7/22. Would that training have to be included in their testing?
He already had a CDL?
I believe so. I don't know if you can, whoever had that question, I don't say your name. If you can, if you'd like to provide some clarification, please let us know. I think it was probably there was probably something you said that prompted that question. So it's probably more specific. So if you could help with that specific.
Well, from general terms, if they started the process with their learner's permit before February 7th, they were good to go. If they did after February 7th, then in order to get their CDL, they would have had to do this training. So it's probably got to be either one or those. They either got it after the training and they did this training, or they had their commercial learner's permit before February 7th, and so they're exempt.
Okay.
Yeah, and the permits are valid for a year now. So if they got it February 6th or prior, they're good for an entire year to get that CDL and do the skills test without having to do this ELDT.
Okay. So hopefully they just commented they just got their CDL this year. So what is the process to become a registered provider?
So that's one of the handouts Dennis was going to share as far as how to register on the training provider registry, but you have to make sure that you have trainers that meet the requirements which is having the license class at or above the class that you're teaching, plus any endorsements. And then there are certain requirements that are listed in the CFRs for your range and road setup and the type of vehicles that you're using. But I think that's addressed in Dennis's handout.
Yeah, I think one of the handouts just has the download from the provider registry site. And if you go to the Federal Motor Carrier site and you'll have a link for this, it'll take you right there where you register and give you all the you have to's and don't have to's for this. But Sarah's right, you have to have a qualified, you have to have somebody who already has the CDL and or the endorsements to be able to do that training.
What is the cost of J.J. Keller materials to get an instructor certified?
So for the J.J. Keller materials, all you have to do is just purchase it. You don't have to have a CDL to purchase it. And then you are, from that point on, their materials are good for you to use. And again, your instructors need to have a commercial driver's license themselves, but for both behind the wheel and when you're giving the skills knowledge, because they're the ones that have to verify attendance on the provider registry. So, but there's nothing that J.J. Keller requires you to do from J.J. Keller to be certified at all. As you buy their materials and you use them.
As I recall, the materials were what, about $300 or something?
I don't think they're that much. I think for the instructor manual, which includes the ability to download copies of the stuff, I think it was like 150.
Yeah, it comes with a fancy little USB that has all the PowerPoints, videos, and digital copies of the quiz, and the beautiful 500-page instructor manual. I think the Class A, like 100 and something, and the passenger endorsement one is $79.99.
So less than 300 for the entire kit and caboodle. So do you have that memorized, sir? That book?
No, this book, do I have it memorized? No, absolutely not.
What is on page 74? No, I'll go from there. Thank you. Okay, Sarah, could you please share this with us at Forsyth County? Thanks, Heather.
I got you, Heather.
Where do I get the J.J. Keller material? Well, I'll send that out in a link when we send this out where you can get that. It's a good question. How do I become an instructor? I think we've kind of covered that, right? You have to have a CDL. Okay. Any other things you want to add to that or that you haven't added already? Is there a standard cost for the training at any of the providers to
some of you may have already looked, but I've seen costs as high as $1,400 for 5 students. I've seen $300 per student. There was another one that had, I think I looked, they were charging $2,400 for 10 students. Some of them were as long as a week in length. So it's kind of all over the map. There are a lot of companies that will make some good money off of this, I'm sure.
But when you register as a training provider, you have the option to register as a private provider. So that's how I'm registered. So like people can see that I'm a provider, but they don't have any way to like register for classes because we only provide training for our employees. So just know that there's a little box that you have to check when you go to register.
And I guess I'm going to ask a question. So, and again, this is putting you on the spot, Dennis and or Sarah. Do you think having a kind of a train the trainer regional class might provide some benefit to folks, make them feel a little bit more comfortable? Is that something that you think would help?
I think if I would answer that question. Sarah and I actually talked about this. I think it depends on what we're doing with the train the trainer. If it's an informational training, I think that would be one thing. If it's training the full content of what's required, that would be a completely different matter, because that would, if you think about how a train the trainer goes, that would require going through the entire content that you're going to teach and then verifying that you can teach it. So if we were ever to do that, we'd have to do some significant planning in advance.
Yeah, I don't think that's probably practical, but
I will tell you, one of the things that you know, Sarah did pass on was having the material here from the J.J. Keller folks. It was really broken down in a pretty easily translatable format that she could use just after reviewing the material a little bit with her prior knowledge. So and I'm sure there's some other companies that also have, you know, entry-level driver training that you can purchase, just like J.J. Keller. We just chose them because we've used them before for other things.
here's another question. Does each student have to read the manual, or do they just go through the info during the classroom training?
So there is a student manual, but when I've done it, I haven't even given that to the students because I only have one copy, and B, it's the exact same information that J.J. Keller puts in their PowerPoint. So I think just having the PowerPoints and the instructor manual are the two biggest things.
Excellent. Here's a comment. Thanks, good information. As a municipality, do we need to keep anything on file with our HR department if we are getting our training done at a certified facility? Again, I would assume you need some proof of this.
Well, I would say if the training provider is the one doing the training, they're the ones uploading the documentation to the training provider registry, but that would be up to your organization if you need to keep training documentation.
If we have employees who already have CDLs before 2/7/2022, would they only need this training if they are wanting to get another endorsement?
That is correct.
Only if it's that P, the passenger, the school bus, or the hazardous materials endorsements. Those are the only three that require it. Other endorsements like tanker, doubles, triples, that kind of stuff does not require.
If we have a trainer on staff who registers to be a trainer, would you be willing to let them observe one of the classes before they begin teaching?
Yes.
Very good. Any other questions? Lots of great questions, lots of great answers. Does anyone else have a question? Just to give you guys a hint, Dennis loves personal questions, so dig in anything you want to ask. He typically will answer. Okay, it looks like that. You've answered all the questions, both Dennis and Sarah. Thank you very, very much for this. We will be doing something very similar at the upcoming at an upcoming conference. So if you have any questions, definitely shoot them my way, and I'll forward them to both Dennis and Sarah for their expertise to get back with you. I will be sending a link to the recording of this presentation, along with handouts, along with the J.J. Keller link, so you can order this training information. Here's some questions. Will you provide the site to sign up for the registration? So I'll do that. Will you email out copies of today's presentation? Yes, I will. Okay. Thank you so much. I will let you guys go. Great job.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Great job. Enjoy the rest of your week.